Hi, I'm Mike Glenn, and I'm the president of the Engaged Church Network, and we are grateful that you've joined us on today's podcast. Today, joining me is Brent Leatherwood, who is the president of the ERLC, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the public policy, political engagement arm of the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, in full disclosure, Brett and I go way back. I mean, way back. I remember when he and his wife Meredith were dating. In fact, I was leading a ministry called Kairos, and Meredith was one of the leaders of that ministry. And Meredith is a very beautiful blonde lady and girl to me. I mean, no disrespect in any of that, but she is young enough to be my daughter. And so we were all watching to see who Meredith would take home from the prom. And lo and behold, you were Prince Charming, huh?
That's right.
And now, tell me,
I still claim that.
That's right. I would. How long have you guys been married now? Make me feel old.
13 years.
Oh gosh, I feel old.
Yeah, coming up on 13.
3 beautiful children.
3 children, a 6th grader, a 4th grader, and a 2nd grader. And yeah, it all started on those Tuesday nights learning about Little Dude and what Little Dude was going to do on the whiteboard at Kairos. Folks may not know that was one of your go-to illustrations.
Yeah, had Little Dude. How Little Dude was handling
Yeah,
it.
Little Dude was always getting into some, trouble and just really needed the gospel to help him get out of it. And so...
Oh man! Now you have been engaged in the political process for some time now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so the first question would be: there are a lot of people who would say you cannot be a Christian in the political sphere at all. So, one, what led you to this? I'm assuming that you are a Christ follower, and that this has been some aspect of his will for your life, has been to be engaged in this part of our culture that many of my friends would say you cannot be involved in it all because it's too corrupt, too nasty. But the opposite is we need good people in the process,
right?
To make these kind of decisions for us. So how would you respond to that question?
Well, sure. First, I would say yes. Let me confirm I am a Christ follower. In many ways, you're a spiritual grandfather. Because I gave a public profession of my faith because of Aaron Bryant, who for years has been under your tutelage.
Yeah.
And Aaron is now my pastor at the Church at New South.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron actually was the one that baptized me in the Harpeth River.
Oh, you were one of those celebrations.
One of those,
huh?
yes.
Oh, man.
And so yes, I am a Christ follower, and in many ways, thanks to you and the years of incredible spiritual guidance that you provided at Brentwood Baptist and through programs like Kairos. So yes, and yes, I've been a part and engaged in the political arena. Gosh, now for over 20 years since really the first campaign that I got on in 2003 down in Florida. It was a U.S. Senate campaign, and from there worked my way up to Capitol Hill in Congress. Moved back home to Tennessee, ran campaigns for the U.S. House. Then worked for the Speaker of the House and the Republican majority in the Tennessee legislature, and then ran the Tennessee Republican Party for 4 years. And now I'm a step removed from that kind of day-to-day political activity and policy activity, like policy conceptualizing and implementation, and now work at, as you said, the public policy arm of the Southern Baptist Convention. And to get to your basic question, should Christians be involved in politics? I guess I would to someone who asked me that, I would ask, well, can Christians be involved in medicine? Can they be involved in home building? Can they be involved in really any aspect of life where ethical questions are asked of you, and trying to accomplish the common good for your neighbor is relevant. And I would say that that's relevant in nearly any sector. I think it's actually, I think an argument can be made that it's all the more important for Christians to be engaged in politics and policy making, only because it does have the ability to affect a huge amount of people, if you're talking at a national level, or even down to your local level, working in your school board, working in your city council. And the reason that I think it's needed is because we need, in a largely dysfunctional culture like the one we live in right now, we need people that don't see themselves as the solution for everything, but are moored and anchored into something that's bigger than themselves. And I think when you are thinking through a grid of how do I serve my neighbor, how do I make my community a little bit better for my neighbor, and really following, Jesus's command to really the full maximal kind of thinking behind it. How am I improving life for even my neighbor that I don't see? Mm-hmm. That I would submit leads to better outcomes than those who are motivated by all sorts of other
So you see
things.
your political involvement as an outgrowth or a logical consequence of Jesus' command to love your neighbor.
Absolutely, yeah. I see it. I see it as one area where that can be played out.
Right.
But that the same applies to a school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
The same applies to a ministry leader. All right. I mean, I think we get into trouble in our modern moment by trying to compartmentalize the gospel away from our politics, I think.
Ah, okay. Expand that a little bit.
Well, there's a number of people who I think when I've talked to them, it's kind of revealed that they think that the world of politics, because look, it can be challenging, and you're dealing with people, as I just said, that are operating under principles that are different than our own as Christ followers.
But that would, to your point, that would be the same in the music field.
Right.
That would be the same in
Yes,
corporate life.
Exactly.
That'd
It's just, I think, in the political arena, because it's very visible,
Right.
And it's covered nonstop in our politicized moment. It just feels more grimy, if you will.
Right.
But we need to be engaged in it, and we need to, as we engage, just be asking ourselves the question that we need to at all times. Am I glorifying the Lord in what I am doing? Mm-hmm. Am I actually being an ambassador for the kingdom, like I should be doing anywhere else? And so that's how I view my own life in the political and policy arena.
Well, we would do well to remember that a lot of the biblical heroes that we celebrate were involved in politics.
Yeah.
Jacob, Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar. I'm not Nebuchadnezzar, Nehemiah.
Right. Absolutely.
All of those were political leaders. Moses was probably the greatest political leader of all.
Yep. No, I trailed off from your question about compartmentalizing the gospel. So many people, they think that they have to operate through political decisions that are made, through political calculations that are made, with some sort of different distinctives and different
Jesus
principles.
is Lord of Sunday, but on Monday
Bingo,
there's a
right?
different king in
You
the
see
jungle.
Right. You're a pastor, so you've seen this play out in other areas of life, but
Mm-hmm.
I see it especially in politics, and they think, well, man, Jesus is just calling me to things that are untenable over here in the world of politics. And I just refuse to accept that premise. And so I think we need to be showing the world that you can operate successfully in the world of politics and policymaking by following Jesus. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to win all the time in politics. That's not promised to us at all in any aspect. But if winning is showing grace and revealing truth, well, then you're winning in the audience, in the
Right.
eyes of the audience of the one
Who
that we
matters,
need to be serving, and that's what matters.
Yeah. Okay, we're obviously in a presidential election year,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got as we record this, we're about a month out
Yep.
or so.
Less than 30 days now.
There's a lot of pressure on local pastors to endorse a candidate, to preach politically,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. How would you help us guide local pastors through this swamp?
Yeah, yeah.
Because
sure.
let's face it,
Pun intended.
if you're too if you're seen as being supportive of this candidate or that candidate, things are so divided right now that when you do that, you lose half your congregation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, we're that split now.
Yep.
So, and a lot of my friends are wrestling with this right now. So, how would you help
Right.
us walk through this?
Yeah. So I'd probably say a couple of things, and I would say at the outset one big caveat: you as a pastor, you are the best judge of what your congregation can handle, and lean into that, trust that. Don't feel this pressure from outside voices, from voices on social media. As a matter of fact, please, in this season, just turn social media off. Be what your people need you to be in this moment. And so I would always want to defer to the local pastor about what he thinks his church can handle. Now, that said, if I'm just kind of broadly offering advice, I would say lean into the moment and reveal for your people that your church and your ministry as a pastor, it's a place where they can come with questions. And it's a place where they can come and understand that the gospel has a lot of relevance for the moment. Right. And so don't shy away from that because if you do that, even though the intentions may be good, your people, as they have questions, if they feel like they can't come to church and talk about it within their small group, their life group,
right.
if they can approach their pastor with the question, they're going to get those
They're gonna
answers
go
somewhere else.
That's right.
And heaven help us with some of the things
That's
that
right.
we are seeing out there if that is what is filling that void.
Yeah, we dealt with a lot of that when people would get their med school degree from Dr. Google.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So be a place where people can come and honestly and transparently ask the question, hey, Pastor, I saw that this candidate talking about this. I'm kind of bumping up against it. What do you think? Does the Bible have anything to say about this? And be open to that and give them feedback. And sometimes give them feedback even if you know it's going to challenge some of their assumptions.
Some of their
That's
thinking.
okay.
Is there a Christian guide that would lead us to how we vote for this candidate or that candidate? Are there issues that would weigh more than others? Now, I mean, a lot of our friends are would say, "Hey, the right to life is an issue that trumps all others." So I'm gonna vote for the candidate who supports right to life, regardless of tax policy or foreign affairs or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, Christians are to be about truth and justice and manifesting God's grace, right? And I think that is what you should be after. If you're after something else, that probably needs to be like a spiritual like caution flag. Like, okay, maybe I'm prioritizing something else. And in the moment that we're in right now, our political parties and political operatives, and don't miss this, people who are actually gaining financially from politics, right. They want to force politics into your life in such a way that it becomes an idol. Right. And far too many Christians are actually allowing it to become an idol.
Good point.
And that controls their thinking and how they're processing the election. And again, it gets back to what I said before. They're starting to compartmentalize. Well, this, man, I love the
real
Lord.
World. This is real world.
Bingo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so make sure that you're going about the right things. As far as issues, I mean, look, we serve our Southern Baptist churches, and we have at the ERLC a very specific ministry assignment. Generally falls into 4 buckets, right? Life, religious liberty, marriage and family, and human dignity. There's a lot of meat there, but at the same time, we don't end up talking about marginal tax rates or school vouchers. Those are important things, and I would leave it to individuals to weigh how important that it is for their own context. At the same time, as you're thinking through the election, everybody wants this kind of. Everybody, it seems, when they're coming with a lot of questions to us, they're wanting and seeking almost a simplistic formula, that they could just put into place for this election and say, okay, that leads me here.
Yeah,
and it's like, man, it's not like that. So many voices are out there like, oh, it's either this or that, and there's nothing else.
Right.
And to those voices that are trying to oversimplify what is a very complex political environment and political decision-making environment for people, I would want to ask, so what do you do with that Christian? So we'll make it more explicit. They try to say you have to vote for one party if you're a Christian. You can't vote for another party.
Right.
So let's apply that into a very real-world situation, such as local elections in San Francisco. Okay. You only have an option between, in that example, 2 Democrats. Does that mean that a Christian who participates in that election is somehow not a Christian when that's the only choice before them?
Right.
Or go back out from a local context to a national context. You may have Christians that are saying, man, I feel uncomfortable with my 2 major candidates for U.S. Senate right now, and I just don't feel clarity on which one to vote for. So I think on this election, I might skip this choice on the ballot. Is that person somehow less of a Christian? I don't think so.
Yeah, if they choose none of the above.
Right. So let's reject that type of kind of template thinking where you could just put some sort of artificial structure over this and it leads you to X, because again, a lot of those people, they're either working in politics or they're doing the bidding of political operatives, or they're actually gaining financially.
Yeah.
And so we
follow
should,
the money.
Yeah, we should resist that. Yeah. And there's going to be lots of good Christians that land in different areas, particularly in an election like this. And that gets probably to my final point. Because we over-nationalize everything right now, everything is about what's coming out of Washington or what's going on in Washington. And I just would like to remind people, man, you look down further on that ballot, you've got really consequential choices before you about things like mayor or county commission, or state legislator.
Yeah, the people who make the decisions that we actually live with.
Bingo.
School board, city council.
Right.
Yeah.
And those decisions more than likely will affect your life far more than anything that's coming out of Congress, which I got news for you. There's not much coming out of Congress these days. This Congress may end up, and it's evidence of just how closely divided it is. But this Congress may end up coming out with less significant legislation than any Congress in history. And so just because
and that's not necessarily bad news.
No, it's not. Right, yeah. I would push back on those who say, oh, well, that's bad. I don't know that you necessarily characterize more policy as being equating to good policy. I would push back on that. But what it does mean, it has the practical effect of making the decisions that are made at the local level that are closer to you probably more impactful than you realize. So take the time to get educated about those lower level offices. We all know what's going on at the presidential level and the choices there. Get down to your local level and get educated about those, because that guy that's running for mayor, he may not have your best interests at heart.
That's right.
Or she may want something that you don't agree with, or whatever.
Or put something in the school system
exactly
that's not helpful. Yeah.
So yeah.
Excellent. Now, as we come to the wrap up our time, I want to spend a few minutes talking with you about if not the worst day of your life.
It was the worst.
It
was the worst.
It just can't imagine. And,
worst day
again,
of my life.
This goes back to how long Brett and I have been together. Your children were at Covenant when the shooting happened, and we were involved in walking through that together. So we've had a little space. What have you thought? What do you now know that you thought you knew, but now you know? Those, yeah. What kind of thoughts have you had since then?
Yeah. So I would definitely not equate my life, because my life has been incredibly privileged after that time, especially compared to our six families that lost someone that day.
Your children were friends with some.
Oh yeah,
who died.
Yeah,
but
Meredith and I were friends with them too. Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, just so your audience understands, I'll get back to your question. Right, to understand the Covenant School here in Nashville, it is a very small Christian school that is a ministry of a church that has, just a very small footprint in the middle of Green Hills, Tennessee, which is a, kind of suburban area, really well to do. But there were people that before March 27th who lived in Green Hills and didn't even know that Covenant School was in Green Hills. That's how small it was. And so for this evil of a mass shooter to make her way into the school and take the lives of six innocent people, 3 teachers, administrators, and 3 children, is just, it's horrific. We probably should stop saying that it's unimaginable that a school shooting could happen given how prevalent they are in our disease society right now. But if there was ever a candidate for a school that it would be hard to think that this would be on the list of schools where this kind of atrocity could be perpetrated. Covenant School would be up there. And so, yeah, I mean, I could say without a doubt, worst day of my life, and nothing else comes close. It was a difficult situation to live through, and even, I mean, to this day, I'm still processing it. I wouldn't equate my life to what Job went through, but I certainly am asking, I think, questions that are at least in the same family of his questions. Like, gosh, Lord, what is it about that moment that you're leading me through and teaching me and want me to do as a person that wants to submit to your will and be obedient to your calling? What is it how is it that I can utilize this, not be defined by it, but instead say, okay, this is now going to be a part of our story. This is going to be a part of my children's story. And what is it that we can do that ultimately points people back to you from that? And so I don't want to anger the Lord and get some kind of response like he gave Job. Like, let me show you.
That's right.
Let me just show you all that I am responsible for as I bring all of this together. But at the same time, I'm still in that place in many ways. And I honestly, I don't know, because I am so insignificant, and I'm not worthy. I don't know that I'm going to get answers this side of glory. Mm-hmm. And I have to be okay with that, because his ways are not my ways. But I have to trust that his glory will be manifested through that. And in some ways, I don't know that publicly everyone can see that, but in a day-to-day sense, living within that community of people whose families went through that, seeing the ways that the community has sought to serve those 6 families, and even to an extent, the family of the shooter, I think has been revelatory, if you will, about the Lord and how He wants us to conduct ourselves. And yeah, so I think our three kids are who all survived that day. They had different experiences in terms of how close they were. But one of our daughters was very, very close to just pure evil. And if things had by mere moments gone in a different way, she would have been out in that hallway with that shooter. And so knowing the depth of the evil that was stalking the hallways that day, and knowing that this was a person, the shooter, who was deeply disturbed, and had all sorts of rambling thoughts that she, scrolled out over years. That's why, the parents have banded together to try and keep that stuff from getting out into the public. And I think most people are like, oh, no, but I want to see it. People who say that, I can understand it in the way that, I guess, you go by a car accident, you kind of rubberneck. I get it at that level. But I think the depth of the evil that is expressed in those writings, and the fact that scientific research shows that there is a copycat phenomena that happens out of these events. And I mean, look, you don't have to look any further than the weeks after our shooting. A few folks may not recall, but there was just a few weeks after our shooting on March 27th, 2023, there was a horrific shooting in Allen, Texas, just outside of Dallas.
Right.
And the shooter there talked about our shooter, and said that he couldn't believe it was a female that killed 6 people at a school. And so he wanted to go to this local shopping mall and take out more people. He was proud of her, but he wanted to outdo her. And then not too long after that, a person was arrested up in Illinois, I think by the FBI, who was obsessed with our shooter and wanted to do his own shooting. And so I think part of what the families from March 27th have wanted to do is try as much as we can to stop that evil from...
To break the cycle.
Yeah. Just to try. And again, we got so many issues with mental health and people who are going through a crisis. Their easy access to weapons to just play out their worst possible deadly fantasies. But our families have just said, we have lived through a nightmare.
And no one else should have to do this.
No other local school, no other local church, no other community, either here or out there, because of the way the internet works. This stuff can tip someone who is dealing with a crisis into active and action, and so we've just tried to say, let it stop here with us. Yeah. And I don't know that we will be successful, but I do know I do think that is something that the Lord has put on the hearts of so many of our families, because in the weeks after, we were just going before the Lord with all kinds of questions and just trying to pick up the pieces and trying to figure out how do you serve a family that's lost a child? How do you serve a family that's lost a spouse and a father? And how do you do this? we all came together relatively quickly to say, okay, well, if we can be active in some ways, legally or on a policy level, we want to do that, and it's all because we just want to stop evil.
And that may be a good way for us to end today. Well, I mean, we do live in very difficult and sometimes dark times. And the worst thing that could happen is for good people to do nothing. We are called to be salt and light, and salt doesn't do much good if it stays in the shaker. I'm Mike Glenn. I'm the president of the Engaged Church Network. This is Brent Leatherwood. He is the president of the ERLC, the political action arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, and we are delighted you joined us today.